Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of For the Health of It, a segment on health and wellness dedicated to getting important health information out to you and to our community. I am your host, Dr. Trevor Kinlock, pastor of the Metropolitan Seventh-day Adventist Church. Today, we have a very serious and sobering topic to discuss, to talk about. It is the topic of domestic violence. We want to raise awareness on domestic violence, and today we have a specialist here to speak with us. Dear friend, I'm pleased to introduce her, Dr. Latay Bradford. Dr. Bradford, so good to have you. Dr. Latay is a family medicine physician as well as an obstetrics provider. She is a clinical researcher with a research specialization in maternal child health. That's a whole lot. Go Black woman.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, Dr. Bradford. So good to have you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, listen, this is a serious topic, and I just really want you to just share your heart. What are some of the things that we need to know? Can you talk to us just about this this scourge, that we call domestic violence, and really help the community out? What are the warning signs that we ought to look for? What are the warning signs for domestic violence?
I am so happy that we're having this discussion. October, as you may know, is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And this is unfortunately all too common in our country and our community locally. We know that 41% of women and 26% of men at some point in their lifetime will report a history of domestic violence or sexual violence. And so I think we need to sort of break down first what is domestic violence and how can we identify it in our relationships and in and around those around us.
Yes.
So we tend to think about physical violence. We have imagery in our minds of a man putting his hands on a woman, and that certainly counts. That falls under the realm of domestic violence. But let's not forget physical, emotional, sexual, psychological aggression. All of those fall under the auspices of what we call intimate partner violence or domestic violence perpetrated by a current or a former intimate partner. And so these things don't tend to just, start, in its most severe form. It usually starts very subtle and then it escalates from there. I don't know anybody that would, continue to date someone who hit them in the face on the first date, you know?
Right.
So it usually starts with, some condescension, some intimidation, some manipulation.
Okay.
So some of those early warning signs can include, putting down a partner about the way he or she looks. It could be threatening violence, threatening to leave, even so severe as threatening to hurt themselves if the partner left them.
Okay.
It can be creating social isolation, so keeping someone away from their support networks, controlling their money, tracking their devices, so being very controlling and overbearing.
Yeah.
This tends to also find, unfortunately, breeding ground in those that have very paternalistic, patriarchal views about how a man should function in the home and how subservient a female should be. So all of these things are red flags that should go off early in a relationship, because from there it tends to escalate from verbal, emotional to then physical abuse.
Okay. So this is real. Dr. Bradford, you were speaking of what you know, and our community, has certainly, we have suffered and felt the impacts very recently within our own community as well, just with domestic violence. So we know the pain of it. So it is important what you just shared, to know what are the warning signs. What should men, what should women look out for as they're engaging or dating or getting to know other persons.
That's right.
That's important. So can you talk to us? You have named male and female. Who is most at risk for domestic violence?
So stereotypically, we think about women being the victim. And while women are in the majority, as far as victims are concerned, we don't want to forget that men, again, 26% of men report some form of intimate partner violence in their lifetime. So that's almost a third of men. but there are particularly vulnerable groups. So women and children, particularly pregnant women, that's a really vulnerable part of a woman's life, and she's often dependent on someone else during that time. Older adults, folks with physical disabilities or mental illnesses, members of the LGBTQ plus community. Those are some of the more high risk groups. But let me be clear that anyone can be a victim. If you are in a relationship with anybody, you are not necessarily protected by any amount of wealth or social status or occupation, or even, let's be clear, even a religious belief doesn't necessarily protect you. But we know that there are those that are at more risk of being abused, and we know that there's a kind of a profile for the abuser. So those tend to be folks who were abused themselves. We know that kids that either experienced abuse or even witnessed abuse in their childhood are at greater risk of growing up than to become an abuser. So there are community structures that we really need to keep in mind around our young people to love and, just overflow with support in those people's lives to protect them from then becoming and developing those behaviors.
Dr. Bradford, talk to us about, sometimes you have partners that feel trapped in a situation and they feel shame. They feel like I can't tell anybody, or, people are just going to feel I'm weak, or whatever the case is, or they feel, like you said, they feel either shame or they feel intimidated, or like they'll be looked down on. What would you say, to those persons?
So I want to say that I see you and I understand, not personally, but I can certainly I can understand kind of what your perspective is and how challenging it could be to leave a relationship where there are deep emotional connections, even perhaps, financial dependence. So I want you to just think about the risk that you take in staying in that relationship. There are far too many women who lose their lives because they weren't able to get out of an abusive relationship. And there are resources to help. So you are not alone. There is a large community ready to support and provide you a safety plan for leaving that relationship. And I want to provide a couple of those resources. The first being the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And I want to get this number right.
Please do.
This is 1-800-799-SAFE. 1-800-799-7233. That is the national hotline, 24/7. You can speak to a counselor and find on-the-spot help in that moment. But there are also local Prince George's County resources that I want to make sure that our listeners in the area know about. There's another hotline from the Family Justice Center that you can call, and again, you can get immediate on-the-spot help. And then Ruth's House can provide emergency shelter and counseling and legal assistance. So there are a few places to turn, in addition to your community and your support network, wherever you are, whether it be church, family, friends, whoever you feel comfortable with sharing. It's important to, protect yourself and your loved ones by recognizing those warning signs and getting out of that relationship when you can.
What about those intimate partners that feel like it's their fault or partially their fault? Like I made him too mad or made her too mad, or I didn't do X, Y, Z, and I got what I deserved.
Yeah, that is part of the violence committed against victims. It is the blame game. It is the shaming of those who are told, you brought this upon yourself. And the point of violence in this case is power and control.
Mm-hmm.
It is perpetrated by people who in and of themselves are insecure, who are dealing with their own mental illnesses and sometimes substance abuse. So for those who are feeling like it's my fault and I'm just too ashamed to even mention it, know that there is help, and know that ultimately you are deserving of love and respect. You can find a different future. You are worthy of a different future.
Yes.
And so all it takes is, and it won't be easy. I don't want to be naive about this. It's often said that women will leave 7 times before they're successfully detached from an abusive partner. So they'll leave and come back 7 times before they can successfully sever that tie. So it is a challenge and it is complicated, but there is help, there is hope, there is a future.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. You deserve life. Your family,
right.
Your children deserve life. And you always want to think about that first. Your life is
That's
valuable.
right.
And the life of your loved ones are valuable as well. Thank you, Dr. Bradford, for just sharing those resources. It's so important because many times victims of domestic violence, like you said, they feel trapped. Like, where do I go? But you just gave us excellent resources of persons that you can pick up the phone and talk to right now that can just listen and help guide you through what you're going through, as well as there are physical space, safe spaces, Ruth's House and others that you gave, where, persons that are dealing with or suffering under domestic violence, can actually go and physically be safe. So thank you. I think, Dr. Bradford, last question for you is, how do I support someone who is dealing with domestic violence?
So you often won't hear somebody come out and say, my partner, my spouse, even. Let's not forget that this can be, masked in the marriage relationship. You won't often hear them come out right and say it, but it requires us to really care. We often ask, how are you doing? How are things? And then we move right along. But when we stop and pause and stay in that space and allow people to open up to us, they often feel the comfort to be able to share more. And I believe, God can place us at the intersection of somebody's problem, right? So that we can be the blessing that they need in that very moment. And so I think even being prayerful to say, God, how can I be used? Open my eyes and show me who I can help today. That's that openness, that willingness is what God will use to help us bless somebody else in their time of need.
So being open, being available, just taking the time to listen are some of the best ways to support. Non-judgmental, obviously, and trying to help someone feel that they are safe with you as someone who's trying to support. Dr. Bradford, we could talk so much, but I think that you have shared, some very critical information just about what the statistics say, as well as giving us the supports, the warning signs to look out for, as well as the resources. So thank you so very much. And we do pray that if you are experiencing domestic violence, we do want to encourage you to get the help. To think about your life and the life of those who love you. You are valuable. And always remember that. Like Dr. Bradford said, there is always hope for you. All right. Dr. Bradford, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come and share with us and talk to us about this very serious subject. Bless you and thank you.
So happy to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we want to thank all of you for joining us. We took a little bit more time because this topic is just that serious, but thank you for joining us for another episode of For the Health of It. I know that this was valuable for so many of you. Please like, share, subscribe, get this information out. We need to do it. We are our brother and our sister's keeper. So again, thank you for joining us for another episode of For the Health of It, brought to us by our Metropolitan Health Ministries. And remember, above all things, God wants you to prosper and to be in good health. God bless you. Until next time.